And this is the first page of the 20-page insert. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, I think you're going to have to stand up. It's a tough job. This is one example of the set of documents that's available. This volume 1 and volume 2, these hearings volumes, contain about 3,000 pages of the government's own documents on the death. And there are thousands more. Oh, one other thing. Somebody might be thinking, well, boy, Hugh, you see a witch on every broom or something. One of the things I did is Admiral Borda, we were told, committed suicide, point-blank shot. With I believe it was a .38. I took a look at the Naval Investigative Service report on the Borda death without getting into what actually happened, applying the same standard that I'm going to be using tonight with the Vince Foster death. The Naval Investigative Service report on the Foster death, right or wrong, true or not, it hangs together. It is internally consistent. What is bugging me about the Foster death are these huge inconsistencies. Next one. Couple of more real quick. This is some more stuff on the Foster death. This is Filegate, having to do with Craig Livingstone and so on. There's some stuff on the Foster death in that one. Next one. This is the travel office hearings having to do with Billy Dale and the folks that got fired in May of '93 at the White House Travel Office. Next one. Okay, this is the Fisk report. This is my burden of proof tonight. This is what I hope you will come away tonight and say, boy, I'm not sure I believed everything Hugh said, but he sure proved to me what he said he was going to prove at a minimum, which is this. This is what Mr. Fisk says. On the afternoon of July 20th, Fort Marcy Park, Vince Foster committed suicide, firing a bullet from a .38 caliber revolver into his mouth. That is the basic official line. Fisk goes on, as discussed below, the evidence overwhelmingly supports this conclusion, and there is no evidence to the contrary. I hope that everyone who leaves here tonight will realize that those two sentences are definitely not true. Let's go to the next one. Starr, this was his press release when he filed his then secret report with the judges. He agrees with Fisk. Based on investigation analysis, review of the evidence, experts, experienced investigators, basically, well, not even basically, they all say the same thing. Next one. Okay, there's my smiling face on the cover of the New York Times. I do admit to engaging in one conspiracy. I engaged in a conspiracy with the two New York Times photographers to get me on the cover. And since I'm a fat, balding white guy from the South, I was 90% there anyway. And so we decided, and they wanted the cover because it helps their prestige. And Philip Weiss, the guy who wrote the article, he wanted the cover too. So we said, okay, how can we enhance my likelihood of the editors picking me for the cover shot? So we had me sit real stiff, not smile, and squint into the sun. And I have another picture the photographer took of me smiling just to prove I could do it. But the image that I see there is of the man who is going to pick up a whip, a man from the fascist right who is going to drive the moderates from the temple of public discourse. So they loved it, and they put me there. They were nice enough inside, by the way, even though this Clinton haters is across my knees. The text of the article makes clear that they did not classify me as a Clinton hater, which is true. I'm nonpartisan in this. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a conservative. Next one. Wanted to give a little bit. This is the fellow who wrote the article. And he gave me permission to print this up, and he has since written 5 other articles. He's a mainstream media guy. Philip Weiss writes for the New York Times, the New York Observer. And his mind was changed. He came to do a personality piece on the Foster kooks and came away thinking, well, I'll let you read what he came away thinking. First of all, he says, if ultimately I massacre you in print, and he doesn't use capital letters, so this is the way he actually wrote it. If ultimately I massacre you in print, meaning the New York Times magazine article, this email will prove rather inconvenient, but I must say your report is a sheer delight and brilliant, a page-turner, something I couldn't quite understand. The narrative itself is cinematic, wonderful. And then he emailed me the next day and said, I shouldn't have said, if I massacre you in print. Down here, adjectives for CIR is the initials of this long report I wrote. Brilliant, humorous, stunning, successful, and here's the key part for me, successful in its stated aim of convincing the reader the central assertion of the Fisk report cannot be true. So this is a mainstream media guy from Harvard, and I've changed one person's mind, at least. Next one. Okay, here we go. This is a little road map. This is Fort Marcy Park right here. Potomac River again, White House is over here, just to kind of set the scene. CIA is up here, just a current Virginia road map. Next one. We'll zoom in a little bit. And here's a park. You can see the George Washington Parkway here and the little exit road going up to the parking lot. The reason I have these maps and aerial photos is that Miguel Rodriguez was the lead prosecutor involved with the Foster death under Ken Starr. One of the things that he wanted to do when he first started his investigation was obtain aerial photographs and maps of the park for reasons that I think will become obvious. The FBI guys who worked for Starr said, "Oh, you're the lead prosecutor on the Foster death. You want these aerial photographs, you want these maps. Drop dead. You ain't getting them." And he didn't get them. And ironically, I was faxing and mailing them to the Starr Office of Independent Counsel at the same time. Now let's go to the next one. This is Vince Foster's rental home here on Cambridge Place in Georgetown. Senator Shelby from Alabama was his neighbor, immediate neighbor next door. Next one. This is the west wing of the White House. This is West Executive Drive. Vince Foster normally parked his car in the 8th slot down on this side of West Executive. He worked on the 2nd floor, Suite 220, right above the Oval Office, west wing of the White House. That is where his car was parked, in this 8th slot, supposedly when he left the White House for the last time. Next one. Rotate, yeah. This is a subdivision plat map. Fort Marcy Park is here. Another senator happens to live here. His home is only about 350, 400 feet from where the body was found. That's Senator J. Bennett Johnston. At the time of the Foster death, the senior senator from Louisiana. These are two very wealthy subdivisions here. This is a Marywood up here, is a gated community. Retired director of Central Intelligence lives here. And until he sold it, Senator Ted Kennedy's home was down here. A lot of people portray Fort Marcy Park as way out in the middle of nowhere. It ain't. It's right in the middle of a very wealthy neighborhood. Next one. This is an aerial trace map I did of the park from an aerial photograph. Again, I'm hoping that you'll kind of remember some of this when we get into the detail later on. Here's the exit ramp off the George Washington Parkway, about 21-car parking lot, very thin, very long, not a big parking lot, only space for about 20, 21 cars. This is the outline of the fort itself. It's an earthen-walled fort. Here are the two subdivisions. This is Chainbridge Road. And officially, Foster's body was found right where the cross is. Chris Ruddy's reporting leads him to believe that it was actually over here. Interestingly enough, there's an old road that runs down the western border. There's a gap in the fence here where a tree squashed the fence. And there's an old cabin in the woods. If you walk along this old road, and I don't know whether this is the way the body got in the park or not, but it's very covert. In the summer, when the leaves are out on the trees and the bushes, you cannot be seen along this road, and then it's literally a walk in the park right across to the western berm where the body was found officially here, or Chris says here. And this terrain in here is, you know, it's not paved, but it's a walk in the park. I've done it, and no one ever goes in here. You might get visitors walking up in the fort a little bit, but I've never seen anyone in here, so you would not be seen if you did that traverse. There's also a gap in the fence here. You could have brought the body up this way. I don't know how the body got to the park, but whether he was killed or he committed suicide, I don't think he came to grief in the park. Next one. Rotate. This is just an old Civil War. No, right side up, other way. Yeah, the viewer turns. This is just the outline of the fort. These are a bunch of magnetic bearings that I did. Just an old Civil War, so-called circle fort. They surrounded Washington to the west and south to protect the capital from the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Next one. Here is remember coming off the George Washington Memorial Parkway, there is an exit ramp into Fort Marcy. This is it. Fort Marcy closed at dark. You go up this road and you go right up into the parking lot after about 150 yards. This is a picture of the parking lot. You can see almost all of it here. This is about the 4th slot. Parking lot ends right down there. It doesn't go around the corner. It cuts off over here. So fairly small parking lot. It's pretty easy to see if a car is or isn't in that lot. Next one. This is there are two cannon in the park overlooking these old earthen berm walls. There are two left. This is so-called Cannon 1. I took this with the New York Times guys, and I took it because the cannon had just been brought back in the park. This cannon had been removed from the park shortly after the death and did not reappear until the fall of '96. Next one. This is so-called Cannon 2. Mr. Foster's body was found on this reverse slope. You'll see a picture of it in a minute, lying on his back, ranged very neatly. As some of the early witnesses said, as if he were laid out for a coffin. Next one. This is the gap in the fence on the north side of the park. Remember where I said you could come in off of Chainbridge Road and perhaps bring the body in through this opening. Next one. This is the old cabin in the woods. You can see the park fence over here. Go this way about 300 feet and you're at the western berm of the park. And this is at the southern terminus of that old road, and there is the old cabin. Next one. Now you're not going to believe this. This is a little bit old, but that is the old road. This is a house at 681 Chainbridge, little circular driveway. If you just drive right down, that doesn't look like there's anything there. There's a road that runs 200 yards down slope. You can see the heavy tree cover. You just scoot in here. Nobody would see your carry-all. Nobody would see you as you went across from the western side of the park border into the fort. Next one. This is all by way of kind of introduction and scene setting. This is the slope on which his body was officially found. His head was about right here. Mr. Foster was 6'4½". His feet were somewhere down here. His feet were 13 feet above the bottom of this slope. So he was laid out, face up, straight up and down this slope, very neatly. This part of the park, as you remember from the aerial trace map, is about 750 feet from the parking lot. It's on the back side of the slope. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's not a lot of the newspaper accounts said, oh, a scenic overlook of the Potomac where you could hear the murmuring water, yada, yada, yada. This is just a mosquito-infested mess back here, and there ain't no view of the Potomac. A rather poor place to decide to shoot yourself, especially since nobody ever knew he knew the park existed. Next one. Okay, now we're going to move on here. Oh, this is a new edition. This is from Starr's report. He had a Dr. Berman. He's a PhD in psychology. He's not an MD. He analyzed the information on the Foster death that Starr's office gave him, and without ever having met Mr. Foster, or even seen the body for that matter, he says, in my opinion, and to 100% degree of medical certainty, the death of Vince Foster was a suicide. No plausible evidence is presented to support any other conclusion. Now, I think it's kind of presumptuous of a non-MD who never saw the guy to say something like this. If I tried to say something like this, my critics would chop me off right across my knees where it says Clinton hater. Anyway, next one.